city of Florence extended in all directions, but especially to the east and to the south. So in this part, that's today Piazza della Signoria. Signoria means lordship, the lordship of future Florence, especially known for the Medici family. So Piazza della Signoria is very rich in archaeological materials. Even if you can't see today what was here, but the excavation started in 1974, 1975, when they had to repave the square, and so they were looking for the floor of the 14th century. During this works, they found the ruins of many civil buildings and a thermal building, so a large bath complex. Then the excavations continued in the 1980s, from 1983 to 1989, and found the very big, very big thermal building that was standing from the northern part of this square, and the entrance was on a minor cardo that was to the north, and that is today more or less the modern Via Condotta. Then this building had a large atrium giving way to a beautiful frigidarium with a round pool, and a very large calidarium, so for the hot baths, paved in marble. Then there was a gallery extending from the building, covered with a barrel vault. In the same excavations had been found another very big building. So the bath buildings was of the 2nd century AD. This building that was found in the excavations of the 1980s was to be dated at the end of the 1st century and the 2nd century AD. So this building was a fullonica. So what is a fullonica? A fullonica is a laundry and a dyeing plant, so where produced fabrics colored and dyed. This building was very, very big, and in the excavations came to light big braziers for the preparation of colors, and big basins with inclinated plants. The fullonica was so big that was impossible, that was for the use only of the inhabitants of Florence, and so for sure has to be referred to the very important period of the colony, so the 2nd century AD, and especially the time in which Florence became important for the preparation and the making of fabrics. This was a large industry that became one of the major activities of Roman Florence. So the square, Piazza della Signoria, was full of buildings at the time. So the buildings that we have described then stood on top of previous buildings of the first moment of the colony. But then in 1996, excavations on the basement of the Loggia dei Lanzi that you can see in these images found remains of the southern wall of the colony. and nearby there were tombs of later ages, so the 6th and 7th century. So when the colony was declining in importance. Then the southeastern corner of the square is sloping down, and exactly there in the southeastern corner of the colony the people of Florencia built their theater. So the theater was located where are today Palazzo della Signoria, better known as Palazzo Vecchio, and Palazzo Gondi, that you can see on the left. The structure seems to reflect the canons dictated by the architect Vitruvius in the 1st century. Roman theater had a cavea, so a round cavea, a circular cavea, that was standing in front of the stage and hosted the seats for the visitors. Then the cavea was divided in wedges in sectors, so having substructures for the seats, and in this case, so people could enter from the top loggia of the theater or from the inside of the theater through vomitorium, so through little entrances in the cavea. In front of the cavea there was a paved round part called the orchestra that hosted the choir, and then the stage and the scenery. So we don't know exactly the position of the scenery because only part of the substructure of the cavea have been found, but possibly it was located to the east of Palazzo Vecchio in Via dei Leoni. Standing here in Roman Florence, you could see the impressive size of the theater that was 100 meters in diameter and about 26 meters high. The theater was big, could host from 8,000 to 10,000 spectators, so people. The theater came to light for the first time when it was done in the late 19th century, a work for a sewer in Via dei Gondi. Then in the 1930s with some work in Palazzo Vecchio. So the most recent excavations in the 1990s in Palazzo Vecchio were able to discover part of the orchestra and the substructures, so the wedges called burelle, and holding the seats for the people. So with the excavations in Palazzo Vecchio, two distinct phases of this building have been identified. The first phase of the 1st century had built in stone only the part of the orchestra, then the rear wall, and the biseglia, so the seats for the most important people that were in the lower part of the cavea, the ima cavea. Then the other part of the cavea was wooden, in wood. Second phase, in the Adriatic age, when the city expanded and was given a more monumental phase aspect, so the theater was completely built in masonry. So we mentioned Palazzo Vecchio. Palazzo Vecchio meaning Old Palace, or Palazzo della Signoria, the Palace of the Lordship. So this building that you can see today in the square and where the theater used to stand was built in between the 13th century and the 14th century. So first by Arnolfo di Cambio, then with works by the famous architect Michelozzo, and then finally with the third phase of Niccolò Ammanati. Palazzo Vecchio has been the symbol of the civic power of Florence for over 7 centuries, and was built to house the city supreme governing body of medieval Florence. Inside Palazzo Vecchio it's possible to visit the archaeological part, and it's very interesting because you can see, so in the subsoil of Palazzo Vecchio, all the historical strata of the city, starting from the lowest one, that's also the oldest one. Down there you could see the burelle, so the substructures, and part of the orchestra. And the major burella, so the central burella, was used as an underground passage to reach the lower part of the cavea.